Hey, Neatarts Friends Church. I'm starting to miss you all. Probably should have said that a lot earlier. But I imagine you're feeling the same way. I've been hearing that from many of you. You just say, I miss being together. So, I hope that you will gather the people in your home today or call a friend and that we can go through this time together, have these conversations together. Today's video starts with the story of Rosa. When Rosa was young, her parents crossed the border from Mexico and moved into South Texas. And so Rosa grew up hearing these stories from her grandparents and from their grandparents about the days when South Texas had been her people's land, Mexico. Rosa and her parents didn't have all of the papers that the government said that they should have, and so she grew up under the shadow of a government that she feared could one day ruin her life. But Rosa was a happy person. She was full of energy, full of life. And while Rosa was still finishing high school, her life turned upside down. She became pregnant. And suddenly, all of the relationships in her life changed. She was the focus of stigma and shame in her family and her community. And all of that happy energy that she used to have, now that energy was viewed as untrustworthy energy, flirtatious energy. She felt like she lost who she was, who she had been in the eyes of so many people, especially in the eyes of her parents. Like she would never again be just their little Rosa. Things changed almost as fast as Rosa's pregnant body grew. She was quietly married to her boyfriend, Miguel. The two of them began trying to scratch out a living as best they could, and without the support of her relatives, they faced the birth of their little boy, Arturo. A perfect, beautiful little boy. And life might have been okay. Except one day, Rosa and Miguel heard the news that raids were happening. Government agents were coming around. They were taking children away from their parents. Children like Arturo, away from parents like Rosa and Miguel. Rosa and Miguel may never again see Arturo. The new government orders put a target on the backs of families like theirs. And so they faced a distressing decision, what to do. They fled to Mexico. Life in Mexico was difficult. Miguel worked long hours trying to earn enough to live on. Rosa wished that her parents could see Arturo growing up. Inside of Rosa, a kernel of hope was beginning to take shape. And it was no longer a hope for her life. It was a hope for the life of her son. It was a life that she dreamed of for Arturo. She dreamed of Arturo becoming educated and successful and becoming a leader, a government official himself, a congressman, a senator, dare she say, a president. She dreamed of a world where those powerful rulers were toppled from their offices and a world where the poor and the hungry were filled with good things. Years went by in Mexico. And then one day, word came back to Rosa and Miguel. The situation in South Texas was safe once again. And so Rosa and her family moved back to be closer to her relatives. And those years in Texas with Arturo growing up, they were good years in many ways. But then, unexpectedly, Miguel died, her husband. And Rosa's life was turned into turmoil and grief. She was a single mom, still living under the threat of a government that she feared. Young Arturo grew into a man. He went to school, he was educated, he started a business, he moved away from Rosa. He started to become a leader in his own community, and so Rosa was always eager to hear the news. How's Arturo doing? What's going on with him? What she heard was positive. People liked Arturo. He was making a name for himself in the community. He was becoming known as an advocate for the poor and the oppressed, people who were treated with injustice. And he was becoming popular. In many ways, Rosa's dream was coming true. But then rumors began trickling back that concerned Rosa. Arturo was becoming a regular at the nightclubs and the bars, hanging out with the wrong crowd in the dark alleys. He was on a first-name basis with the meth heads, the crack heads, the call girls, the mobsters. Rosa once wondered, does he just need to take a step back? Is the pressure getting to him? He should be spending his time at the city hall meetings and the lecture halls, the universities, the courthouse. Even worse, Arturo was saying things that were making the community leaders, the county commissioners, the sheriff, the DA, making them angry. He was criticizing them. And so Rosa started to hear rumors that the leaders really had it out for Arturo. She knew they could be nasty. She knew the kinds of things that they did to people who crossed them. Rosa had dreamed for so many years of Arturo becoming a community leader, and now instead he was targeted by the community leaders. With each bad rumor, with each bad report that she heard back, she became more and more certain that her son was nearing a mental breakdown. He was becoming delusional, misguided in some way. He needed a mental health break, or he was just going to lose his mind completely. So she decided, doesn't matter if he's a grown man, it's time to play mama bear. It was time for Arturo to come home and take some serious downtime. Arturo needed a reset. Rosa went to fetch Arturo from the city, from the crowds, but Arturo wouldn't listen. He refused to come home. He refused to admit that he might need a mental health break. Instead of going home with his mother, Arturo stayed with his friends, and he began calling other women his mother. It cut Rosa to the core. Now she felt completely alone in the world. What are you supposed to do when your own son wants to call other women his mother? How are you supposed to cope when your son is completely lost and loses his mind, and chasing after him only seems to push him farther away? When things couldn't get any worse, they did. Arturo was arrested for conspiring against the government, sedition, treason. Rosa was certain that the corrupt community leaders, the DA, the county commissioners were behind it all. The trial happened so fast that Rosa could hardly get her feet set for what came next. Arturo was convicted. He was charged as guilty and sentenced. Lethal injection. Lethal injection? Her mama bear rage was as high as it had ever been. She wanted to scream at the corrupt leaders. Don't you know he's not a threat? He's simply out of his mind. But that wouldn't stop them. There was nothing that she could do. If she threw herself in front of the political machine now, they would only crush her as well. At the same time, as she felt the mama bear rage, her heart was as broken as it had ever been. Her son's death was the last thing in the world that she wanted to witness. But if it was going to happen, nothing could keep her from being there. Rosa watched in disbelief as the guards strapped Arturo's hands and legs into the bed and prepared him for lethal injection. She was as lost as she had ever been. She longed for Arturo to reconnect at least with her as his mother, to cry out, "Mommy," and to give her one last embrace. But instead, in his final words to her, Arturo was still misguided. He said that she was the mother of a friend of his. It was a kick in the guts, beyond what Rosa could bear. Time slowed to a crawl as the nightmare unfolded, as Arturo's heartbeat came to a standstill. That beautiful little boy who she had loved for all of those years lay there on the bed, dead. She walked out of the place and vomited all over the sidewalk. She couldn't help it. It was her body's rejection of that much pain, that much evil, that much wrong, that much tragedy. There are no words to describe what she felt. Disoriented, lost, like every kernel of hope had just been crushed out of her. Every expectation for any goodness in this world was gone. There must not be a God in this universe. All hope was gone. The story I just told you is true in its content, with a few slight adjustments. It didn't happen in South Texas. It didn't happen in recent history. It happened in Galilee in the 1st century. Rosa wasn't named Rosa, I have to admit. She was named Mary. Miguel wasn't named Miguel. He was named Joseph. Arturo wasn't named Arturo. He was named Jesus. The capital punishment wasn't lethal injection. It was long, slow suffocation, crucifixion, torture. You can read the 1st century version in Luke 1 through 2, Mark 3, Mark 6, John 19. It's the story I just told you in its 1st century context. A threatening government, the promise of a Messiah, a kernel of hope that the government leaders would be toppled so that the hungry could be filled with good things, a new kingdom, a new Messiah, and then a son who Mary thought had lost his mind. That kernel of hope for a Messiah just dashed with the death of Jesus. There was no way to make any meaning of any of it. It was simply a tragedy, a murder. Now, whether I surprised you with the twist on that or not, the story, you may want to rush towards the resurrection. Like, well, yeah, wait. I know the rest of the story. There's an explanation. There's a resolution to the pain. But that's really not being fair to the story. This is Holy Week. Today's Palm Sunday. This is when we remember the rejection, the murder of Jesus, the disorientation. And there's nothing in Jewish literature that would signal to us that Mary or any of the Jews thought that the Messiah was going to die as a sacrifice for their sins. They were not anticipating a Messiah who would be murdered. So, the first question for all of you to discuss is, how does thinking about this story in terms of Rosa and Arturo help you to connect with Mary's experience? What is it that stands out to you about Mary's experience, about Rosa's experience? You may want to look back at some scripture, but have that conversation. What stands out to you? So pause the video now. As humans, we want to make meaning out of our experiences, including the times that we're living through right now. It's like we want to understand what's going on. And all of our attempts to make meaning of COVID-19 stand as a sign of our discomfort, our anxiety with the entire situation. People are dying unjustly. A lot of people are struggling with their mental health right now. Your relationships this week may not have been what you would like them to be. Living in quarantine. If you live with yourself, you may be getting annoyed with yourself. No one asked me if I was ready for life to get flipped upside down. It just happened. And so now we're trying to make meaning of the situation, or we're trying to fix it. For some people, it's the making meaning. So it's various versions of blame often. It might be spiritual, political, environmental, but it's here's what's going on and why. For other people, they just want to fix it. Like, can we find a way to make it better and make it all go away so we can just breathe a sigh of relief? The last thing that we want to do is simply live with the tension indefinitely without understanding it, without making it any better. So pause the video and answer this question. Do you tend to be someone who makes meaning of situations like this? Or are you more of a fix-it person? Are you just trying to understand it? Or are you trying to fix it? So pause the video, have that conversation. Shouldn't Mary, the person with one of the most intimate relationships with Jesus in human history, shouldn't she be able to make meaning out of her son's life all along the way? And when her son lost his mind, shouldn't she be able to get him back on track? And yet, as we read the story, it took Mary decades to fully understand and accept what Jesus was saying, what Jesus was doing. In fact, Mary did not fully understand everything until after it happened. But, and this is the really important part, there is something that God offered to Mary all along the way. It's very important. When her life was turned upside down, which, how many times did that happen? There was something that God was offering all along the way. And it was community. People to walk alongside Mary. She was never really alone. And God was making sure of that. God gave her a husband who could have abandoned her, but didn't. Joseph. God gave her a cousin in the midst of a family who probably didn't get it. God gave her a cousin who trusted her instead of shaming her. An old man in the temple, offering wisdom way beyond what she could grasp as a teenager. Simeon. Another old woman, a prophetess, inviting everyone to understand how special this little child was. Foreign travelers offering financial assistance, the Magi. Her own son inviting her into this new community, this new family that he was creating, even with his dying breath, inviting her in. And so in Acts chapter 1, the rest of the story, we find that the story ends with Mary right smack in the middle of all those friends of Jesus. The kids who Mary used to think were a part of the problem. Like, they're the ones that my son is losing his mind with. But now, Acts chapter 1, we find her smack in the middle of those friends. And the reason that we have the 4 Gospels, these 4 different renditions of the life of Jesus, is because, in part, because Mary didn't just go home after it was all over. Like, whew, I'm going to huddle away and recover. Glad we made it through that one. No, she planted herself right smack in the middle of that community that God was giving her, the friends of Jesus, and she began telling her story, warts and all. That's why we have the story that we have. She told her story over and over. The meaning making for Mary had only begun, and the meaning making happened in community. Now, why does that matter for us? Well, we're living in really weird times, and we want to make meaning of it, and we want to fix COVID-19. And those things are important, but the question is, right now, are you seeing, are you embracing the community that God is inviting you into? I don't mean breaking the social distancing rules, but what if that is the primary thing that God is showing you right now? What if God is inviting you to see what a gift the people in your life really are? Your family, your friends, the people you take for granted, your church family, your neighbors, your community, our healthcare workers, even the people on the other side of the spectrum, the other side of the issue, the people who you used to say, yeah, they've lost their mind. Today, the closing activity is, first of all, go around the room with whoever you are gathered with and name one quality about each person that you have undervalued, something about them that you have taken for granted. Name it as a gift that God is giving to you. If you're watching this video and calling a friend on the phone to watch it that way, do that activity with them. But then we don't want to just keep this in our homes. I want you in your circle to name someone outside of your household, someone who's not with you right now, someone out in the community, and a quality about them that you've taken for granted. And then later this week, call them. Tell them what you appreciate about them. And let that energy build. See where it takes you this week. The question is, can you trust God with the community that you've been given, even while you don't yet understand or know what the answers are? Love you, Neatards Friends Church. I'm praying for you. Please remember to reach out if you have any needs.